Hello, everyone. Welcome to the F1 House. My name is Sakki, and today we're joined by Adam.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Yep, Adam's the newest member of the F1 House team. So look out for some exciting content coming from him over the next few days. I've seen it, I can vouch for it. So yeah, check that out. Today we're going to be doing a different type of video. It's going to be our very first live stream. It's going to be mainly talking about news events that have happened in the past 7 to 10 days. We'll touch a little bit on what's happened in the most recent race at the Tuscan Grand Prix, but mainly it'll be news topics. Today we're going to be talking about Max Verstappen's reliability. We'll look at what Martin Brundle has said about that topic. Just looking at his teammates. We'll also look at um, Mercedes and what Toto Wolff has planned in future in terms of where he'll sit within that Mercedes F1 team. Is he going to be leaving? Is he going to stay? Because there's been a lot of interesting comments coming from Toto and other people in the paddock. And then we'll also talk about a few other news topics. But let's dive straight into the Max Verstappen news article, which came from Planet F1. It basically says strange, only Max has reliability issues. And it's just kind of looking at his record in the past 9 races, which has been pretty shocking, really. I don't know what you think, Adam. What do you make of it all?
I think the thing with Max at the minute is he's absolutely pushing the limits of the car, isn't he? They're desperate to try and be competitive at the grid there with Mercedes, but I just think their package is lacking. They don't have the power that Mercedes have.
Mm,
I think I'm sure, obviously we're going to go into this a little bit further, but I think the ambitions for Max as their top driver is that he's supposed to be challenging for the top step for the podium every weekend, and maybe for Alex Albon and other people in the past, he's maybe not that. So I suppose there's a question to be raised about how hard pushing the engine. Obviously, the engine modes thing is very interesting, um, and I'd like to mention that a little bit later. But I think the expectations are so much higher for Max, aren't they? And they've invested millions and millions in developing the car around him. So yeah, I think there's interesting factors going into it, definitely.
yeah, I think the pressure is definitely on Max to be performing. It's probably the most obvious statement of the year, but I think the record that Brundle brought up, he basically said in the last 9 races he's had 3 DNFs due to reliability issues. So that's pretty damning, especially when you compare that to the record of his 3 other teammates. I say that loosely, they're obviously not in his team, but we've got um, Pierre Gasly and Kvyat as well as Albon to look at from the Honda engine supplier. They use the Honda engine, so you can look at their reliability quite and look at an indication of where Max should be in terms of his reliability. And I think for me, I'd be worried if I was him because I don't know if you remember a few races ago, he came back onto the paddock, and I was like, who's this guy? Because he was so happy, enthusiastic. He wasn't complaining about anything. He didn't look angry like he can do sometime. Like I like to see the fire and the passion come from drivers. Max has got that in buckets, but when he came back a few races ago, he was so happy. I couldn't believe it, and I feel like he might sink back into that kind of mindset because he can't guarantee that reliability from their engine supplier. I know that Honda have made so many steps to improve that reliability, but when he could have potentially challenged at least Bottas for that P2, um, it would have been upsetting for him, and you could tell that he was angry. You could tell.
Yeah, I think the thing with Max is like I mentioned, he the expectation for him is win or it's it's no good.
Mm,
Whereas you look at AlphaTauri, and obviously working on a slightly more limited budget, you're looking at drivers like Alex Albon. The main thing for them is to score as many points as possible, as often as possible. So although the engine modes have been banned in terms of changing them in a race weekend, I suppose there's a question to ask about whether Max is permanently on a slightly more adventurous engine mode, shall we say, and are they pushing the envelope
yeah.
more in terms of reliability because they want to
Mm,
try and close the gap with Mercedes at the front. I don't actually know. I know that everything that I've read on engine modes is that teams are banned from changing engine modes. But
Yeah.
if teams have slightly different engine modes per driver, which I'm sure they do, because obviously not every engine is the same, and each engine needs specifically tuning to all of the circumstances that you might come across on a race weekend. Perhaps they're pushing the engines harder for Max. We know that he's very aggressive. We know that he likes to ride the curbs, and he likes to stick himself in those situations where maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. Obviously, the crash happened thing has kind of plagued him a little bit. So perhaps they're just pushing harder with Max, and that's resulting in worse reliability. But I do agree there is pressure on him now.
Yeah, and I feel like sorry,
Go on.
No, I feel like Max
Well,
as a driver.
He wants it to be.
I feel like Max as a driver is the type of driver to try literally anything to get the most out of the car and treat it almost like a go-kart, as in try things that worked for him in the past. Obviously, that every driver does that, but I can imagine him working with Adrian Newey to just try things that Albon and the other two drivers aren't doing, which, like you said, could potentially includes having an engine mode that puts more pressure on the car and the engine mainly, and which just leads to that reliability issues. I think that's a great point that you mentioned. Actually, I've never actually thought about that.
And of course, obviously, with him being the first driver, with him being their primary interest, any kind of new stuff that's coming through the development phases, he's going to get first. And obviously, the first person to get it also always gets teething problems. So all they do is testing, and they do all the testing that they do through practice and stuff. As soon as you start putting new elements into a car, there's more potential for things to go wrong. So I think between the fact that he's getting developed parts, he's pushing the car harder, there's higher expectations. I don't think there's any doubt that Max is one of the best drivers in Formula One. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yeah.
But
well, some people would question. Some people, everyone will question.
Well, he will put the car anywhere, and he will do whatever it takes. If he thinks that he can get himself a second over a race weekend, he'll do it. Even if it means risking the car. He'd rather fight for a win and go through every driver in the field and protect the car and make squad podium. But there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Obviously, we need drivers like that. But maybe this is contributing to these results that he's getting in a minute.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that sentiment. I'm just going to pause 1 second. We have our very first question as well from Tevis Lin. His first question is, do you think Red Bull should sign Gasly? And then there's another question, is Mercedes not getting George a mistake? So do you want to take the first one? I'll take the second one.
Okay.
Cool.
No, I think they should stick with Albon.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, obviously, Gasly's really come into his own with AlphaTauri. But there was never a question about his talent and his pace. The question is about whether or not he could handle the moment and whether or not he could handle being a second driver.
Yeah.
And I think Albon's podium, although yes, he was on target for podiums in Austria and he's had good performances, I think that podium means a lot to him. And it was also a really important response to Gasly's win in Monza. I think it was important that he got a solid result in. I actually think Albon's really good. He's got the right temperament. He's known as like one of the nicest guys in the paddock.
Yeah.
And I think he's kind of the yin to Max Verstappen's yang in terms of, he's willing to. Obviously he wants to win. Obviously he wants to do well. But I think he kind of slots into that role more naturally. Whereas Gasly does seem to be a bit more of. He seems quite enigmatic and he seems quite charismatic and he wants to be that lead driver. Do you know who I think should sign Gasly?
Who?
Mercedes.
Yeah, there's
Just go crazy.
Yeah.
Let's go crazy. Because let's face it, everyone thinks that Bottas is probably not going to, maintain that seat after this current.
You're very polite, Adam. You're very polite.
Well, it's the first one, isn't it? Maybe wait until the second. But yeah, I think let's shake it up. I don't want to step on your toes too much about Russell. Obviously, he's a great talent.
Yeah.
But Gasly's a race winner now, and I think he would fit in that little slot behind Hamilton. I think he's right for kind of learning from someone like Hamilton. I think he's got great potential. And if I was Gasly, I wouldn't go back to Red Bull if they offered me it outright. I don't want to be going backwards and forwards.
Yeah,
Obviously, there's more to it than that, but as as a competitive young man that Gasly obviously is, and now he's had a tasty victory. Why would he win with AlphaTauri and then go and be Max Verstappen's right hand man?
yeah. For me, there's the question is Albon doing a good job? And I think given the situation of not having the best equipment or equal equipment to Max, being a certified number two driver, I'm pretty sure that Max has got stuff written into his contracts about having first option on certain things. If it is not the case, I think Red Bull definitely prefer him anyway. And Albon has done a decent job given the situation. So to answer your question, no, I don't think Red Bull um, should sign Gasly. I wouldn't want Gasly to go there again anytime soon either, because I think that he's probably best off out of Red Bull for the next few seasons. And I think, like you said, having Max as a teammate, that is it's a pretty tough challenge. And unless you're willing to kind of sit back and just let Max get on with it and deal with the consequences or the situations that have been built up around Max, then yeah, you're not gonna do well. Because the way that I like to think about it is Red Bull, the F1 team, is a business, and they've basically put all their chips on Max. If you look at how much they're paying Max compared to Albon, I think Albon must be on 1.5, £2 million maybe.
Mm.
Not more, nothing more than 3 million, I would say. But I remember looking at the figures and actually figuring out how much more Max is paid, and it's actually ridiculous. So if I was
Yeah.
Christian Horner, why would you not put all your eggs in Max Verstappen's basket? Like, why would you not
Of
just
course.
back him and give him everything that he needs? So for me,
Mm.
if I was Red Bull, I wouldn't, because he's been there, he's done that, he's doing well in AlphaTauri. I think it's great to have him in and amongst the setup, and then I think they're in no rush to change anything at the moment, because who's going to step up and take Gasly's spot? I don't think they'll look outside of their driver academy, the
Mm.
drivers that they employ. So realistically, who's going to come in and do a good job? It's just too much of a risk for me.
Mm.
And the question of Russell, um, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think with Mercedes, like, they've obviously got two very good drivers. Whatever anyone says about Valtteri Bottas, he's still a very good driver. He's just nowhere near the level of Lewis Hamilton when it comes to a number of things. Um,
You're playing it safe in Sakki, yeah.
yeah, I am playing it safe. Don't need any pitchforks and crowds coming after me. But yeah, I'm playing it safe, just like Mercedes. Just put it that way. Mercedes are playing it safe. They do not need to bring in another driver that potentially could challenge Lewis Hamilton, because Valtteri Bottas is doing a good job. He's okay. I'm being generous now. He's doing
He's doing okay,
he's
isn't
doing a
he?
decent
He
job.
started off well.
Yeah, he started off well, had a bit of a dip, but it's not easy when you're driving against a six-time world champion. Like,
No.
I think a lot of people take it for granted what it takes to get to that level, and I think
Mm.
Bottas isn't doing such a horrendous job that he deserves to.
No.
He deserved to basically get dropped at that point when he was discussing his contract. And people also need to remember that there are a lot of other factors that come into play. Like, people say they don't like politics in F1. Well, F1 is a very, very political environment in its own way. And if you look at the pure fact of it, go back and look at my video about how Toto Wolff made all his money. Valtteri Bottas is basically um, Toto Wolff's driver, in essence, because Valtteri Bottas is signed to the management company that Toto part owns. So where is the interest going to lie? Toto's going to
Mm.
want to keep Valtteri Bottas earning a good amount of money within the team, taking a certain percentage of whatever sponsorship deals he makes, any wages, any partnerships. It's in Toto's interest. That's why I think personally George Russell's going to really struggle to get into the Mercedes seat until Toto kind of takes a step back and there's less of an impact from Toto. I know it's going to be a bit of a long shot, Toto just relinquishing the reins of power, which we'll discuss a little bit later. But I just think it's a bit dubious, because why would you take that risk when you've got a winning formula? They've been there in 2016. Do they want to go back there again? I just want to say, like, Russell is a top driver. I really like him. I would love to actually see him in that seat as an understudy to Lewis, but I don't think it's going to happen. And for Mercedes, I think it was probably a good choice for them, given what's happened in the past as well.
I've got a question for you.
Go on.
Who do you think is going to leave Mercedes first, Hamilton or Bottas?
See, this is the thing. If Bottas knows that he's got that in and he's pretty much guaranteed to get signed year after year after year, I think Lewis is probably going to leave first, if I'm honest with you. I think Lewis would leave before Bottas. Because if you're Bottas, you're thinking, this is the championship winning car. Why would I leave?
Yeah.
Why would you leave? And I don't see it changing next year and the year after. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? So I can see Bottas being there for the next 2 years at least, probably even more. What about you?
Okay. Well, yeah, obviously I need to bring a contrasting point now, don't I? So I think that I'm not sure if this is common knowledge or not. I'm pretty sure this is true. I think George Russell would maybe contemplate it next year, but there was a clause in his Williams contract that said that it was basically a team option, that they could keep him for 2021.
Okay.
If that clause wasn't in there, then maybe we wouldn't have been looking at a Bottas renewal. But I think Hamilton will be there longer, and assuming that Wolff stays, which obviously we're going to talk about a little bit more. Assuming Wolff stays and there is no major changes, obviously the rule changes are coming, but I would still expect Mercedes to do well. I would not be surprised if Lewis's camp is aiming for 10 world championships, 10 drivers' championships.
Yes.
Which would be massive, obviously.
That's scary. Huge. That's scary. I'm not gonna lie.
because let's face it, he's odds on to win this year, isn't he? That's 7.
Yeah.
He's got roughly the same grid next year, so he's probably the overwhelming favourite next year. That's 8. By that point, he'll be 36, 37, and he's probably going to be in the best funded team. Although there's budget cap, there'll be ways around that the first year.
Yeah.
So you've got to win 2 more, which obviously that's a big deal. Like winning 2 drivers' championships is a big deal. But I think I would be surprised if it's not on his mind. It would be on my mind if I was on track for a 7th. And in that case, you've got to expect Russell to come in 2022 or 2023. You've got to, I think. Yeah, that's my take on it.
That is a pretty long period of dominance right there. I think with that in mind, going back to Max Verstappen, I was thinking about this earlier. Like, he must be going through a world of turmoil in his head, knowing these reliability issues within Honda and Red Bull have gone away and they've come back. And when is it going to improve to the extent that they can challenge? Because it's unlikely that they will next year, and there's no guarantee that they will in 2022. So they've got the ace card there. They've got Adrian Newey, who really comes through and shines in terms of new regulations and finding loopholes. But there's literally no guarantee that this is going to happen, because Ferrari are going to be funneling all their money and energy into developing that 2022 car as soon as they can. Mercedes aren't going to let off. And then there's going to be teams like Racing Point, Aston Martin. Like Lawrence Stroll means business. Like, you can just look at the way he's operating now, bringing certain characters into the team. They're investing heavily in the workforce. If you look at any of the F1 team websites, they're probably one of the only team that are actively hiring. And then there could just be a wild card in there again. There's McLaren, who are so strong. Renault, who knows what they're going to do. So for Max, I think it's a very worrying time for him, because he's got to this age where he should be winning his first title at this age.
McLaren's obviously going back to Mercedes engines as well, aren't they? So you're going to have Danny Ricciardo in a Mercedes-powered car. That's very dangerous.
Yeah.
That's very.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Because because you've
Yeah.
seen what he can do in that Renault car. The
Yeah.
McLaren is clearly quick. I'm very excited to see what he's got coming up. We're just going to jump in the comments now. Got quite a few comments. I'm happy. First stream. So we've got one from Sal Owl. Say, keep going, F1 House. You're doing awesome, great analysis and facts. Thank you. Then we've got another question here from Justin Elliott. Will Hamilton be seen as the best racer in F1 history after he retires? Ooh, okay.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. There was a question that often gets asked, but for me, I think it's inevitable. I don't think people appreciate him fully now for what he's doing in the sport. But it will happen at some point. Once he does leave, or once he does smash all records in existence, people will recognise, and he will be seen as the best racer in history. Obviously, there will be some that just will never ever agree. No matter what Lewis does, there'll be people that say there's a Senna or a Fangio or a Schumacher. But in my opinion, it's Lewis. Lewis probably is the greatest because of the story. Lewis has a story that it just can't be matched. It may be matched. I'm not going to say it's 100% not going to happen, but his story is so strong. Like the way that he came up through the sport and going further, what he's doing now beyond the sport. I know it's a contentious issue. People have got their opinions about politics in F1. Politics, I use that loosely. But he's more than just a F1 driver. He's doing everything that he can beyond that to make sure that he's using his platform in different ways to try and basically better the world and people around him. So I think that's the key thing that he kind of symbolises more than just an F1 driver, which, it's hard to compete with.
Yeah, you said something then about how he's more than an F1 driver, and it really reminded me of LeBron James on his more than an athlete mission.
Okay.
And he's another example of someone that is in the contention for greatest of all time in his respective sport. But you get haters and you get kind of people, the detractors and people kind of pulling up strange stats from the dark side of the internet where it's like, oh, well, actually, this person's not very good. Like we've all seen it. But I'd like to look into the best drivers of all time at some point. It's on my list. But I think in terms of just raw numbers, he's just another level. And I think he's definitely on that kind of 1A, 1B kind of conversation with like Schumacher. And I think personally, I think Schumacher is the greatest of all time. I just don't think there's any real conversation to be had. I think he's the greatest ever. But Hamilton is really there. When you look at percentage of races won and things like that, it's because obviously now calendars are bigger than they used to be. When you look at percentages and things like that, he's very good and his percentages stand up to criticism. Yeah, of course, like people say, he's had the best car and F1's boring because he wins all the time. But you get that every single time. There is a dominant team, a dominant player, a dominant whatever in any sport. It happens in everything.
Yeah.
And they're not appreciated at the time. And I think, he does. People have criticised him for different things in the past, and maybe rightly, maybe wrongly. Like it's it's up to individuals to decide. But I think when the lights go out and the race starts, at the minute, I don't think there's been anyone better certainly since Schumacher.
Yeah, that's a point that you make. Like at the moment, for me, Schumacher is the greatest. But going back to the question, I think by the time that Lewis does leave the sport, I think he will be the greatest. Purely just on the track, the trajectory that he's going at in terms of championships, race wins, podiums, fastest laps, etc., etc. The long list of records that he's smashing. I think by the time Lewis does leave, he will be the greatest. But like you said, if you look at the statistics and the ratios and all the scientific stuff, Schumacher still he's just up there as the beacon, the target, the person that everyone's aiming for, and the name that will just be remembered forever. So It's a constant debate, constant debate. Let's move on to the next topic because yeah, this it's taken longer than I have thought it would. I thought it would be over in 5 minutes.
It was a good question,
Yeah,
though.
very
Very
good
good
question.
question.
Thank you, thank you. Keep on sending your questions in. If you're watching this back on a replay, I'm gonna upload it obviously, but make sure you comment and like. Um, Make sure you subscribe if you're new, not seen F1 House content before. Really would appreciate it. But moving on to the next news articles. And obviously, I'll link the news articles that we do talk about down in the description once I do upload it. But this one is talking about Toto Wolff and the fact that Eddie Jordan, of all people, I love Eddie, I'm not going to lie, has, has come out and said that Ineos, the title sponsor, actually, I'm not sure if they're a title sponsor, are they? No. The Ineos, the
No,
main sponsor.
Jonas, isn't it? But
Yeah.
they're a major partner.
Yeah, Ineos, a major partner of Mercedes, have come out. Of not, they've come out. Jordan is basically predicting that they're gonna buy the controlling stake in Mercedes F1 team very soon, which obviously has a huge impact on Toto Wolff's position within the team. But Toto has since come out to basically deny the claims in one way or another. I'm not too sure personally how strong those denials can be taken because with Toto, what you need to do is actually look at the wording and the way that he basically puts his sentences together. He's not saying that it will never happen. He's also not saying that they aren't going to increase their share in the Mercedes F1 team. He's just saying that they won't have the majority stake, which is is such a key little
Very
bit
clever.
to, yeah, it is very clever. But he is very savvy in terms of his persona and being PR friendly. He's not going to give the game away. But I'm curious to see what you thought of those articles. Do you think there's any substance to it, or what do you think's going on?
Well, first of all, Eddie Jordan loves breaking stories, isn't he?
Yeah,
Anything he hears, he's like on the blow to Sky Sports telling him.
yeah,
Um, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw more Ineos involvement in the future. They're going to start building cars. I don't know if you know this, but they're building the old school Land Rover Defender lookalike type thing.
okay, yeah,
So they're moving into cars. So it makes sense for them to be a little bit more visible. But yeah, I can't see. The thing is, the article kind of references that like what more can Mercedes do? What more can Petronas do? What more? What more can Toto do? Well, they can carry on winning. They can carry on. Obviously, like, so there's kind of this skew to it. It's like, well, they've been dominant for years. They're at the top. They're at the top of the game. So maybe that's it now. That to me seems like the complete opposite of what you would do. If you're dominant in something, and the main purpose of being in a thing is to win it, and you're winning it, you don't then say, right, okay, that's enough of that now. You would continue.
yeah,
So if I was Mercedes and Petronas, I would be saying absolutely no chance. Maybe let them invest a little bit more and take another part of the stake. Obviously, there's Niki Lauda's 10% stake that needs to be reassigned at some point after he's passed in. Maybe some of that will be involved. Or maybe Toto will start to step away ever slightly. But yeah, I can't see Mercedes giving up the rights to this because it's such a strong brand message that they're not only winning weekend after weekend, but they're also exploiting it and giving that brand message out there, which is obviously crucial at the minute. So yeah, I can't see Ineos taking it.
yeah. I think for me, like you just said, I can see them having more of an active role in their partnership because I think Toto or Eddie came out and said that it's a partnership, not a sponsorship, which is a very interesting thing to say. And you just need to look at what are the intentions of Ineos. This is a $1 billion revenue company. That's insane. That kind of revenue, they could easily buy the Mercedes F1 team, but I don't think they will do it as quickly as Eddie thinks it will happen. I definitely see them buying more shares in the team, and having more of an input, because it lines up with their business plans in terms of that
Mm.
lookalike Land Rover Discovery.
Yeah.
They're planning to really push that. They're developing their portfolio all the time. I find it so interesting because it's from what they started off doing, working with chemicals and large scale production of those, it's to moving into sports and having that cycling team, a sailing team as well,
Mm.
and now they're moving into auto car production, which is so cool. It's really interesting. Just on that point, they need an engine supplier at the moment. It's BMW, but I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if the Mercedes kind of have more of an input in providing that, because it's a partnership. Like I keep on hearing, and I think there'll be more input from them. I don't see them having a majority of control in that F1 team unless things really go belly up for the F1 team after the new rule change.
Mm.
When Mercedes might just think, let's call it a day. We've got teams that we provide these engines to. We have a foot in the door. We'll hold some of the kind of ownership, but let's hand over the reins. We've had our time. Like I said in
Yeah.
my video, everything that goes up has to kind of come down. And I think Mercedes have had a good run, but I don't see them just stopping. Like you said, it's just a no brainer because it's so good for the overall brand, their sales, being able to do things that other car manufacturers might not necessarily do. Ultimately, I
Mm.
think that's where Aston Martin Racing Point are heading. They want to be able to have that combination of car production and F1 team because they work so well, and it leads to
Yeah.
more sales. That's why Mercedes got back into F1, and it's worked. If you look at the numbers, their global car sales has gone up. It's gone through the roof basically, and I can
Mm.
imagine similar happening to Aston Martin once they do get up and running. So I don't see Mercedes just walking away. On the other side of the question is Toto Wolff. What's happening there? Because I know that you shared an article, or not an article, a YouTube video from Sky Sports. I think it's where is it Ted Kravitz? He's talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah. The notebook.
the Notebook. So he's talking about a number of things that happened in the Tuscan Grand Prix, and then he goes on to talk about Toto Wolff and a bit about the way he's moving at the moment. It's a bit mad. He's moving like a bit of a geezer, wheeler dealer again. But there's been signs there. There's been loads of signs, and even during the Channel 4 highlights, the way that Toto's talking about getting migraines and got to think about the work-life balance, and he doesn't see the role of team principal being relevant in modern F1. He thinks it's redundant, basically. Like
Mm.
he's basically saying that his role is not important anymore. So there's a lot of things that are coming from Toto himself that is a bit weird. Like it's not like
Yeah.
he's being caught out by the Sun newspaper or a tabloid. He's actively putting himself out there. He's saying,
Yeah.
"Come and interview me. I want to put my story out there. I've got an agenda. I know what I want to communicate." So he's obviously trying to
Mm.
get this message across, and I think probably Lewis probably knows a lot of what's going on in terms of Toto's main goals and in the next few years. And I think for me, Toto's logged off already. He's gone. He's
Yeah.
gone. He's gone.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to
The
hear what you
points that you're
think.
making about this kind of the way he's feeling at the minute. He did an interview with Nico Rosberg on his YouTube channel. They did a podcasting together, and he spoke a lot about mental health. And it was a brilliant interview. It's one of the best I've seen in terms of F1 stuff. He was really open about mental health and how everyone has problems and struggles and stuff. It actually made me really kind of have a lot more respect for him. As like not just his accomplishments in terms of F1, but just in general.
Yeah.
Um, but he does seem to be very aware of real life as well as just F1 at the minute. And obviously his wife Susie runs the Venturi Formula E team as well, so
Yeah.
they barely see. Yeah, so like you say, I can see the impression that I get of Toto is that he's a project starter, and then he just kind of lets it bob along and intervenes when he needs to. which leads back to your point about him moving a little bit crazy with Strolls and Racing Point.
Yeah,
It would be strange if there was a little project that he started there, wouldn't it?
yeah, would be just a little bit, just a little bit.
Particularly considering he's just bought a small stake in Aston Martin at the same time as Stroll did.
Yep, yep. And just in case anyone hasn't seen that video by Ted Kravitz, he basically said that Toto went off for a walk with Lance Stroll, which is super super weird.
Yeah. Lance came and got him, didn't he? It wasn't even like they just bumped into each other. Lance actually went and got him.
Yeah. So there's the point that there's a point that Toto has shares in Aston Martin, but for me, if you look at the way that Toto was talking, especially throughout the brake duct incident, for me it was like he was talking on behalf of Racing Point, which was super super weird. Like he would talk about Mercedes, and then he would get asked questions about Racing Point, and he was giving full blown answers, and I was like, this is very weird. It's like he's the team principal of both teams. So for me, I can see the move. I can see the move happening at some point. Maybe not immediately, but yeah, Toto's making the noises about taking a step back.
But playing devil's advocate, you could also say that he's just defending his customer team, because obviously they work quite closely together, seeing as the cars are basically the same. Customer team's interests, but it is still weird, and there are enough dots to join and make a picture that kind of makes sense. Particularly considering the investment stuff that's going on behind the scenes, which is. There's a video coming out on that thing, isn't there?
Yes, there is. So everyone, like I said, keep an eye out for it. We've got some exciting content coming from Adam. I've had a sneak peek. I really enjoyed it, especially his exit. I feel like stealing that. Definitely beats mine. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for joining. We're gonna call it a day here. Anybody watching this, once I've uploaded it, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you've got any questions or ideas about the kind of things we should be discussing in these videos, I'm going to try and keep them fairly relaxed and informal, and keep it on kind of topic of what's been happening in F1 over the past few days around the race. But yeah, I'm going to call it a day there. Thanks for joining everyone. Yeah, until next time.